Afternoon, I'm Max Brantley. It's Tuesday, December 2nd. News in Arkansas today. Legislative committee's meeting this morning on prisons and parole. The attempt to get tougher on parole, guess what? It worked. They're sending more people back to prison for violations. But the problem is that when they get parole, they come back again for other reasons. The recidivism rate is 50 to 60%. This creates a huge problem. It creates packed prisons. It creates a backlog for parole officers that makes it hard up and down the system. The solution, spend more money. The Arkansas Department of Community Corrections says they could use 200 more parole officers. They say they could use more what they call reentry centers to better prepare former prisoners for the outside world. All of these things cost money. Now they say these things cost less than a full-blown prison with the kind of guards and staffing you have to have there, but it's still a difficult process. What the legislature will do about this is anybody's guess. Money is not going to be in overabundance. We got a state tax report today on the revenue in in November. The money was up against November last year, and it's up beyond the forecast by a little bit. There's probably 20 or 30 spare $1 million, which sounds like a lot, but in $6 billion, it's not a lot of surplus. Will that cover a new prison? Would that cover a tax cut? Would that cover teachers' insurance? Would that cover new parole officers? There's a long list of needs, wants, and desires, not so much money to pay for them, particularly if the legislature doesn't reapprove the private option version of Obamacare and we lose that amount of federal money. So big problems for the new conservative legislature in January, which, by the way, one of their members yesterday said the teacher retirement system, which is about 40 years behind in meeting obligations on actuarial standards, thought they ought to give teachers a one-time bonus of greater than a 3% increase in their benefits this year because they had a pretty good investment year. This is supposed to be a fiscally conservative group. They don't sound like it so much right now. We've got news today on the Arkansas blog and coming this week in the Arkansas Times for Ernie Dumas column on the subject of pipelines. Not very sexy unless one's about to run through your backyard. There's growing opposition to a plan to build a crude oil pipeline from Cushing, Oklahoma across the foothills of the Ozarks to a refinery in Memphis. Interesting political point. Nobody wants a pipeline in their backyard, but every major Arkansas politician has supported the Keystone XL pipeline, which would ship Canadian crude down through the Great Plains of the United States, not through Arkansas, to Cushing, Oklahoma, and then on to Texas refineries. I wonder if the people like Tim Griffin, Tom Cotton, and French Hill, who had a lot of photo ops at the pipe plant in Little Rock that makes pipe for such pipelines, because they support the Keystone XL pipeline, how they'll feel about running the same sort of oil through the same sort of a pipeline across the foothills of the beautiful Arkansas Ozarks. Is that okay? Should we not be worried about the environment here? We shall see. It's something to watch. The Arkansas Lottery is still struggling to reach a contract with Intralot, the Greek lottery games player that provides $11 million a year worth of services to Arkansas. This comes against a backdrop of a planned committee meeting Friday by the legislature, at which a consultant is likely to issue a report about how they would restructure the way the lottery is run. There are a lot of legislators that don't like the way it's run now. There's an indication that the Hutchinson administration, which will take office in January, has some things they'd like to see changed at the lottery. I think we may be about to see some sort of upheaval in that game, which has produced money for college scholarships, but not nearly as much as was anticipated in the beginning. Tom Cotton continues to make news. You may know that this week he was one of the most outspoken critics of President Obama for proposing a delay in deportation of immigrants who are in this country without documentation. Good Story and Think Progress this week pointed out how Tom Cotton himself has acted through little notice legislation to get, guess what, a delay in deportation for illegal immigrants. This just happens to be a Sudanese family that he wants to favor. Some other Republican congressmen have done the same thing. It's demonstrably no different than what President Obama has proposed to do for other immigrants. A little bit of a double standard at work, it seems like. There's news today from Searcy where the police have begun a search near the Little Red River, acting on some cues from cadaver dogs. They're still looking for the 2-year-old child, Malik Drummond, who's been missing for more than a week. Nobody believes that he'll be found alive unless he has been abducted, and so there's been a sad turn to that case, and we'll be watching for developments in that. Finally, there was a new report out today from a group called Wallet Hub that compiled information from about 5 different statistical indicators to conclude that Arkansas is the 7th least charitable state in the United States. That is, we're less likely to help charities out than all but 6 other states. Well, This runs counter to some studies based on IRS tax figures that have always shown Arkansas a relatively charitable state in the top 10. This is because although the poor people in Arkansas are poor, our incomes are low, they give a relatively large percentage of their money to charity, particularly to the churches, because we're a church-going state. When you add in some other factors, though, we don't turn out so well, and I think it's a good point to remember when you hear politicians say, hey, government can't afford to provide social services. That's what churches, that's what individuals are for. Maybe we're not doing such a good job in that area either. On that sober note, I'll call it quits for today. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.